Legacy media is falling apart, and as it crumbles, a void is opening, a void that we intend to fill. The big legacy news networks currently average just 1.2 million viewers a weeknight, and those numbers are only going to get lower. Legacy media is dying, and the younger generation has moved on. Legacy media panders. Legacy media lies. Legacy media does not know what the truth is, and they don't care about it. Legacy media is a dumpster fire. This is why we few in our wild imaginations have started the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Our goal is to take down the legacy media giant of the last 50 years with our 5 stones. We started in 2016 with our flagship show, Cross Politic. Since those small beginnings, we now air on DirecTV. Our broader podcast network now gets over 4 million downloads a year. And our Fight Laugh Feast pub, which includes TV shows like This America, The Rowdy Christian's Guide, Pastors in Politics, and As the Lord Pleases, with your support, many more to come. Our goal is to become the flagship new media 2.0 network over the next 50 years and take over nightly news, sports, sitcoms, hunting shows, and more, all conveniently stored for you in our Fight Laugh Feast pub. We're already reaching the next generation through our podcast shows on YouTube, X, and our pub, while also tapping into legacy media audiences by airing our shows on TV through DirecTV and Xfinity. We have made a lot of progress with some duct tape and a good bit of intuition and a lot of sweat. And now we need your support more than ever. The TV networks have had such a negative impact on our households, and we're trying, by the grace of God, to put a stop to that. We have the opportunity. We just need the army. Now more than ever, we need you to join our pub to help us reach our goal of 1 million pub supporters in the next 5 years. There's no way around it. Competing with Fox and the Alphabet networks without money is virtually impossible. It's cheap for you to join. And when you do, you're combining your small monthly support with a growing army of like-minded Christians. We have thousands, we need millions. So if you want more of the Alphabet network's misinformation and lies, don't join. But if you want to give us a mere 5 stones, then please join the pub, and together we will take a swing at the head of big media, all the while fighting, laughing, and feasting to the glory of God.
Get my ear on. Woo!
Hey y'all, welcome to Water Break with my wife Annie and me, the Water Boy. It's good to be with you guys. Make sure you download our app. There's a lot going on in the network. Other shows. We got Cross Politic, which is another show I host with my pastor and my friend Knox. And we also have some shows like In the Bullpen with Mark Dewey. It's a great baseball show. He's honestly probably the best voice on the network. If you haven't heard Mark Dewey, he's fantastic. We're also going to be in October. Me and Annie will be at our conference, prodigalamerica.com conference. Sign up for that. You can also, if you have a business and you want a booth there, there's still some vending spots open. And go to prodigalamerica.com for that. And we'll see you there October 31st through November 2nd.
I think I want to have a booth there somehow.
That would be
So
probably really busy for you. Yeah.
I know. I'm thinking about it, guys. Thinking about it.
I don't think you'd need it, but
I might be in business, or
Yeah.
in maybe I would have to have off.
set up a consulting booth, just like a counselor session or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The doctor is in. Let's talk about your health.
Yeah. This topic, you guys should really go watch the Tucker Carlson show where he interviewed Calley and Cassie.
Casey.
What did I say? Calley and Casey Means, MEANS. Go find that show.
Yeah.
And listen to it, because we're going to bring some clips in from the show, but it's not going to fill out all the there's going to be some gaps there that you really need to just hear straight from Calley and Casey on this.
It's 2.5 hours.
My wife for years has been talking about seed oils, has been talking about healthy eating, or eating as I like the terminology I like using, whole foods. Whole foods, is that what you use?
Yeah, whole foods,
nutrient-dense foods,
real food.
And I believed her about like eating healthier and not as much fast food and all that stuff. But when I listened to that, that Tucker show, the thing that really kind of boggled my mind or really kind of changed me was how corrupt the food industry really was.
The food and pharma. Yeah.
The food and pharma and all that stuff. And I know, I mean, like in our age and time and our distance from the gospel and distance from God, things are going to get more and more corrupt and more dark. So you kind of,
there's corruption everywhere.
You just kind of have like this general principle, like, things are probably not that good. They look better than they appear or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had that kind of general idea. But when Calley and Casey were like bringing receipts.
Yeah. Like really detailed facts.
It really, I think, just kind of like, oh, wow,
it's bad.
That's bad. Yeah.
It's bad.
And so we're going to start, we're just going to introduce them to kind of Casey's story and how they kind of also woke up. Casey was a doctor at Stanford. Calley went to Harvard Business School, and he, was part of a Coca-Cola.
He's more on the political
lobbying side of things. I mean, just
side. And they're brother and sister, so it's really cool and really interesting. And I have listened in the past to them both being interviewed separately.
Yeah,
and they're kind of in this. This is kind of on the skirt tails, whatever.
Short list.
No, like this is on they were kind of riding the wave of the fact that they just put out a book that they co-wrote together called Good Energy. I have read it and I do recommend it. So go back and read, listen to this whole interview, but even more so, go read their book, and they'll reference it several times.
Good Energy.
Good Energy. Yeah. And they both just bring very, very, their brother and sister, and they just talk about this topic very synergistically with her medical background and his like political lobbyist, his perspective. So there you go. That's who they are. Okay.
Very, very helpful. So this is Casey. I keep wanting to say Cassie.
It's hard.
Casey's
the girl. Calley
is the brother.
It's hard to keep their names straight. Yeah.
That's right. And this is her kind of telling her about actually her residency and her time at Stanford.
Her journey through medical school. And
So 9 years into medical training at Stanford, you gave it up voluntarily.
On my birthday, 30th birthday, I walked into the office of the chair of the department, and I put down the scalpel and I walked away, and I devoted my life to why are Americans getting sicker every year? Why are 50% of American children dealing with a chronic health issue? This was less than 1% 50 years ago. Why is our health getting destroyed the more that we spend?
It.
That was it for the video. Okay.
It's fine.
My ears went out, so I couldn't hear anything anyways. Like, so I didn't know what was happening. And so she was at Stanford for 9 years. She talks about how she put down the scalpel.
9 years.
After 9 years, and walked out, just quit on her birthday, apparently.
Yeah, at the age of 30. So that's like
30.
9 years is a long time.
Yeah,
and that is
to be
so
into
much
it.
Money in education, blood, sweat, doing those brutal hours. I think it was her last year of residency. So she's doing surgeries. She's like ear, nose, and throat or something. That was her specialty. And she talked before. I've listened to it, so I know her. I've listened to her story several times. But she said her big moment, probably right before she actually just went and quit, was she was doing surgery on this woman, like for the third time, some sort of sinus surgery. And she was just like,
why are we cutting her up again?
Well, it just dawned on her that nobody was asking the question of why does she keep having these why is she so sick and unhealthy that she's having to have all these surgeries done? All we do is slice and dice. We never get to the root cause. And she was like, she's obese, she's pre-diabetic, she has all these other things. They have to play into why she is so sick to the point that she needs not one, not two, maybe 3 surgeries at this point. And she's just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why we've emphasized so much on a water break, that you want to try to keep your health diagnosis objective as possible. And that's why we push the blood tests a lot, and push what your blood's saying. We're able to test that and see what's going on there. And as opposed to somehow, some way getting to the scalpel before you even know maybe some of these root causes. So,
well, okay, is your point that we've been saying use some of these helpful objective measures so that you can be preventative and not let your health escalate to the point where you're like, well, shoot, now I'm a diabetic, or shoot, now I need to be on a statin, or shoot, I got to get a surgery. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Yeah. No, but I'm also just saying the fact that, like, I mean, I wonder how many, I mean, she obviously had blood tests done because she had to go into surgery. But how have they,
I don't know.
I mean, I assume they did, but, go through that blood test process and then figure out, okay, before you get into surgery, try to have that root cause conversation, which the lady wasn't having.
Yeah. Well,
so keep things objective as possible.
Yeah.
As you even start to process, going into surgery.
Yeah. I mean, this woman that we were just describing, because that's the story she tells. I mean, her story probably goes back 20 years of like blood sugar
unhealthy,
creeping up, being sedentary, not eating well, all these different little things popping up, which as they'll talk about in this interview, all doctors, specialists look at as completely separate. Like, oh, you're having issues with your vision. Okay, let's just deal with your vision. They're not asking like, oh, is this?
Are you diabetic?
Yeah, exactly.
My dad had problems with his vision.
Right.
It was all connected to diabetes.
You have circulation. Oh, you're not sleeping. Here's a sleeping pill. Oh, you're not doing that yet. Rather than being like, okay, all of this is probably caused by just general metabolic dysfunction and unhealth, and a lot of it could be improved by improving that root issue, but no one had that conversation with her. And that's true for a lot of people, whether they get blood work or not. Just to be clear, blood work's healthy, but helpful, but you have to use it.
Well, and what's crazy, I don't even know if we have this video. I don't think we do, but they were talking about that 90%. Does this come up in that video, Neil? 90% of medical educational, I mean, they're all mostly government programs, don't require doctors to take a nutrition course.
Yeah,
90%
is one of those. Do we have that?
I don't think we have that
linked
clip.
Up. Yeah, Calley.
She has convinced me that this is the most important issue in the country. It's an issue of corruption that starts at Stanford Med School being 50% funded by pharma and not training doctors on one nutrition class. Stanford Med School, Harvard Med School, 90% of med schools don't offer or require one nutrition class. Doctors simply aren't learning why people are getting sick, which we'd all assume they do. 80% of the course loads in pharmacology. It's on how to take people that are getting sicker and sicker and manage those conditions, not to cure them. And that's a huge problem because that dynamic of the largest industry in the country is destroying human capital.
Oh, nice work. That was seamless timing, Neil.
That was stat. 90% of medical educational programs,
medical school,
don't require doctors to do nutrition.
Doctors are trained. It's where they go to school, and 90% zero nutritional training is required. And you know what? That makes perfect sense with what I see and the people I work with and the stories I hear all the time. Like doctors just have no idea. Okay, not only do they not know what in the world they're talking about nutrition, if they talk about it at all. And that's a whole separate thing. Like, are you even talking to your people about? I have so many opinions on this. It just drives me crazy.
And if they do talk about it, they tell you to eat oatmeal or something.
And they point to the food guide pyramid, which is usually still plastered on the back on the wall somewhere. And they're like, well, you eat more oatmeal. That's literally the party line. They have no idea what else to say. That's just what they were taught in maybe the one class that they took. Maybe they didn't even get that. Even at Harvard and Stanford, which is insane to me. So they're either giving zero nutritional advice, even though food is medicine and affects everything, and or they're giving terrible advice. And so many of these doctors are so horribly unhealthy themselves, which also really bothers me. I am going to be really honest about that. Like, that's not true of all, but I mean, if you find a doctor who actually takes care of their own health, practices what they preach, hopefully they're preaching something good, they're fit, they're healthy. I think that's rare. I think it's rare. And it's like, how is that even possible?
Well, and then Calley in his follow-up comment said 80% of classes have to do some way, shape, or form with pharmacology.
Yep. And
which is why you go to the doctor, and it's a chemistry equation for them.
We have a pill for that.
We have a pill for that.
We have and I want to be credit where credit is due. That is for better, for worse. It's definitely for worse. How doctors are trained right now. So it's kind of, at least given the way that things are, the way med school is set up, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense to go to the doctor for nutritional advice because they're not taught any of it. They would have to self-teach. They would have to do what I did, what I've done, right? Because I wasn't taught. I actually did take classes in college.
Classes at University of Idaho.
Nutrition, sports nutrition. They weren't very good, but so I don't know if at this point taking classes
back then they were built off the food pyramid, weren't they?
Totally. Still? Still, it's probably even worse now. So I don't even know.
You had to undo. You had to undo some stuff.
Yeah, I've had to undo it. So I don't even know if the answer right now is Harvard putting classes in, because who's funding Harvard?
Yeah, well, apparently pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. I mean, we've learned a lot in this interview, but
and also we aren't against pharmaceutical medication. I love it. I love a good, ibuprofen. I would love a good, basically narcotic if I had to go under knife surgery or something.
Yeah. We are good at acute care, and like a good doc, even if they don't have nutritional education, which unless they're self-educated, they probably don't. They're still going to help you with pink eye, and that's really nice. And like when you do need an antibiotic, maybe they're overprescribed, maybe they are, but like when you do need one, that's really helpful. If somebody breaks their arm, we're very grateful for that. But what we're not good at is understanding the body as a whole and managing and treating root cause of this metabolic dysfunction that is truly the root of almost every chronic disease, chronic being the word, that a person can have. And it's a problem. It's a problem.
Yeah. So here's Casey talking about basically Sick America.
Oh, yeah. I like this one.
The reasons why Americans are getting sicker every year are very simple. Americans want to be healthy. Americans do not want to die early. They do not want to see their kids with all these chronic health issues like autism and food allergies and obesity and prediabetes and 40% of teens with mental health issues. No one wants this, but the system is rigged against the American patient to create diseases and then profit off of them. This is happening across almost every lever of our major industries, from processed food to tech to pharma. What Americans need to understand is that these trends can stop immediately. We need to understand why we're sick, which is our primarily our toxic food system and the ways that systematically several industries are profiting off of our addiction and illness. And if we can understand that and create very simple top-down and bottom-up strategies to address it, Americans will become rapidly healthier. And so as a physician, I took an oath to do no harm. And I took an oath to help patients thrive. And so the way that we can do that is by helping people understand the levers of corruption that are essentially keeping us sick.
So they get into this topic later too, but even our own practice in our family, I remember, when babies are born, they get immediately on a vaccine schedule.
Yeah.
Like immediately. What are they, like 7 vaccines over the course of it?
I cannot remember the number.
I forget the vaccine schedule. It gets up to like 49 or something.
There's
now
60. I can't remember the number.
I can't remember stats.
Calley had it.
Watch the whole show.
But they do talk about that even like as soon as they're born, like day one of their life outside the womb in the hospital, the
hepatitis B
standard of care is a Hep B shot and erythromycin in the eyes, according to them, simply because it's supposed to mitigate chlamydia, and they give
which is a sexually transmitted disease that they test the mom for before the baby comes.
To the baby, they want to give it to your baby, even when, and most of the time, mom does test negative for chlamydia. They'll give it to him anyways.
Yeah, right.
And I remember guys. I have so many regrets. Like I feel like I've always been healthy and like let's exercise and like on the healthier side of things, but like COVID red pilled me really hard.
Medical pilled.
This guy. You weren't into the health and the exercise as much, but you were red pilled. You were like, came out that way. Like you were always like,
don't trust the system.
Don't put that on my baby. And I remember when our babies were born and I got a little more on board with each one, but I remember when Liv, our oldest, was born, I was very.
And they asked us.
Yeah. And you were kind of, you didn't throw a fit, but you were very like, no, do not give my baby a Hep B shot. Yeah. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, why are you fighting with our doctor? Why are you like, they're doctors, like they probably know. Now I'm like, they don't know.
Yeah.
And why are you doing it? And like literally, Calley at some point, I don't know if we have this in the clip, said he has pushed doctors on this. Why are you giving babies a Hep B
shot?
Yeah.
Day one.
He's like, they're not doing heroin right away. They can't, they're a baby, know? And the only answer was like, literally like, what if that child trips in daycare and falls on a needle?
Yeah.
Like that was the only answer. And he was like, has there ever in the history of like medical anything been a report of that happening? And the doctor was like, no. So it's like, there's no, it's just like, they just do it. Right. Shoot that baby up, get him on the schedule. Let's go. And Gabe and I talk about this all the time. I'm not anti the concept of a vaccination at all. I think it is, or inoculation. It's a means theoretically to fight the curse. I have no problem with it, but I am full of regret that I was not way more skeptical of just the assumed standard of care vaccinations that we allowed all 3 of our kids to get. I wish I had deep dived every single one of them. And I cannot believe I didn't do that.
Well, we let our kids get
I cannot believe it.
So we didn't immediately when our kids were born, give them any shots. We didn't do
we
that.
Said no
that
to
was crazy.
Some that just seemed insane.
And then
but they
some
got the
we
standard.
didn't.
They got the standard.
But they got
battery.
the minimum.
Yeah.
That and we have a school that we can actually take exemptions.
I should have
from,
looked into each and every one.
We should have taken exemptions.
And I don't know what I would have found. Like, I mean, maybe some I would have been like, okay, I think we would have been like, this is worth it. This is
chicken pox or whatever.
But, I mean, it's like, what's in them? Like what they talk about. Is there aluminum in there?
Is there dead babies in there?
Is there formaldehyde in there? Why are we shooting this into our child? Is that better for them than them possibly getting what?
Right.
Yeah, I am so full of regret.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think we learned a lot from that. But I mean, I think the point is like, and I think a lot of everyone's in some form of the same boat where and this is what this Tucker show with Calley and Cassie changed for me, was that we generally we generally had a trust for the medical establishment. Yeah. We generally had a trust in the, big box, big cereal. We generally had a kind of a trust. No, back in 2005, we kind of did a little bit. Yeah. That's when we had our first child. Or no, 2010. 2010.
I did.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Surgeon General.
That's right. So
NIH.
we kind of generally trusted, and even though like we were skeptical of shooting our babies at first with vaccines, now same thing for you. If I had to do it all over again, I would have done way more research when they were 6 months old or whenever. 1-year-old when we started giving them vaccines.
Well, and I just want to say, Gabe, just the fact that you were not afraid to just say, hey, it's our baby. It's our choice. No, thank you. That there is nothing inappropriate or weird about that. And I was a perfect example of the way most people, women in particular, we tend to have a hard time with this. I was just like, oh gosh, don't just say it's so wrong. Yeah. Like it is correct to use your common sense. Yep. It is correct to do your intuition. Research, to use your intuition. I mean, in this case, it's just like, why do we have to do this on day one? Like, give me one good reason. This doesn't even make sense. And just to stand up for your child, and that doctor is there to work for you. That child is yours. Your own body is yours. You're responsible for it. And like this whole mindset of like, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to trust the experts and the doctors, which I don't even think we can do. And that's what we're talking about. Yeah. But just even if you trust them, you can still have autonomy. You can still be like, no, thanks. Yeah. And wives or whatever, whoever you are, don't look at that as being rude or like doing anything.
It's your child.
And it's not inappropriate at all. Yeah. And like, we all should be doing this more. We should be pushing our doctors, asking questions.
Yeah, right.
They owe you an answer. And if they don't have one,
then go find an answer.
Don't do it.
And so you can always say too, you can ask your doctor the question. And if you don't like their answer, you can always say, well, let me think about it and we'll get back to you. Especially with like your baby getting shot at 0 months old. You can easily say, no, they say, hey, we want to give your child a Hep B shot day one. And you don't know what to say then. You can always say, hey, let me do some research and think about it, and we'll bring our child back in if we want to end up getting that shot.
And this is true for anybody at any point in their life. Right. It's an exaggerated example when you're talking about your infant day one, in the hospital, but like of any weird drug or whatever that anyone might suggest for any child at any age, any adult, like, okay, but is this something that lifestyle could change? Is this something that my diet could change?
That's
a lot of times the answer is yes, but the problem is doctors aren't trained to even know if that's possible.
Yeah, that's right.
Or they don't
because
know
they don't even get a nutrition class.
They don't know anything about it. And then again, half of them are unhealthy themselves. Yeah. So it's just like,
so I have this category now that came out of 2020. I call it the medical industrial complex.
Yeah.
The medical industrial complex exposed themselves pretty significantly in 2020 when none of them pushed back against the general population of wearing masks, when none of them pushed back against the 6-foot social distancing, which we all knew it was a joke. And so that the medical industrial complex for me has lost all trust for me. And that comes from that stems all the way from the CDC down to the university, down to kind of the local hospital we have in town. I mean, they were requiring people to wear masks through something like, I think, May of 2023 or something. It was a long time. Maybe it was May 2022 or something.
Zero pushback there.
And so I really think as Christians, we need to figure out, and here's what's sad. Here's what's sad about the medical industrial complex is a lot of these hospitals were started by Christians, the Presbyterian hospital, the Methodist hospital, the Lutheran hospital, the Catholic hospital, the Catholics, all this stuff. And so we started an industry. We started a hospital industry that was fantastic, and then we sold it to the medical industrial complex. And so how bad of a move. This is how Christians need to think strategically. I know our show's not even about this, but it just made me think of this.
Yeah.
Christians lost the ability to think strategically when they started these hospitals and then sold them to big medical industrial complex.
Yeah.
And man, we need to go back into starting our own hospitals. We need to go back and start our own surgery centers.
We need to start our own med schools.
Our own med schools. That's a big one. That's a big one.
That for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just processing this.
Well, I've told you we should start a couple things around that.
I mean, and
certifications and all that stuff.
Totally. And I mean, I'm not saying I really don't have an answer, but I've thought that for a while. But when you listen to some of the stats that these guys spit out, and I looked up a handful of them, every single one of them is right on the money.
Mm-hmm.
If you just go okay, is that really true? Yeah.
Yeah.
But just how much money, how many donations, how much, what do you call that? Grant money is given to prestigious medical schools by big pharma and big food.
Well, let's actually.
Do we have a clip?
We got a couple clips here. So we got a couple clips because these were some really awakening moments.
Yeah.
In the interview where go ahead and play the relationship between the food industry and the cigarette industry is incredible.
This
play
is
that
a super
clip now.
fun story.
The food industry and the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. And I think this is very telling. It's something I learned. So in the 1990s, the two largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. The two biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. You had in the 90s, these two cigarette companies very strategically do two things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment. The second thing they did is they shifted their lobbying. So the cigarette industry, of course, was the biggest, lobbying spenders and had a good playbook. They shifted their playbook on lobbying and rigging institutions of trust to food. So they created the food pyramid.
So remember
the food.
Remember the studies.
Pyramid.
There's we talked about cigarettes. We had some jokes about cigarettes back in I think April in our show. And there's advertising out there talking about how a cigarette a day was healthy for you, that kind of thing. Yeah. We talked about how I think there was an advertisement about how Coke was health for you, for you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we talked about all that.
And so there was, I think there was a study back then also done saying that cigarettes had some health benefits or whatever.
I mean, everybody smoked. It was the standard.
And then the government. This is also. I'm so against government regulation, even with cigarettes. But then the government starts regulating cigarettes, so cigarettes start feeling squeezed. They got all this cash, all this money. So they start feeling squeezed. General
came out and was like, actually, they're bad for you.
Yeah.
And so they're like, what do we do?
So they squeeze the cigarette industry. So the cigarette industry is like, okay, well, we'll just go buy another industry that's profitable. Pivot
to Pop-Tarts.
Yeah. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And then then they take all the researchers and they don't fire them. They're like, hey, we got actually jobs for you in the food industry.
Security for life. You're really good at getting people addicted to stuff. What can you do with cereal?
And so that's how you end up with your MSGs and chips or something.
Oh, all kinds of ingredients that we don't even know the names of. And so I just want to pause on this. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this concept. I think the cigarette and food thing is really interesting and it makes sense. All their like late 80s, 90s, like it all kind of fits, Yeah. But what was I going to say? Totally lost my.
You can think about it for a second. But this is where also the food pyramid came out of.
Yes.
Right. The food pyramid had everything upside down. And so you have Kellogg cereal or whatever lobbying basically the CDC.
Yes. Refined processed grains at the base of the pyramid.
That's right. Processed grains, base of the pyramid, and like meat is on top or something.
Yeah. Dairy, saturated fat, huge more saturated fat, 7 to 9 servings or something ridiculously high a day. Recommended on that pyramid.
Yeah. And so that's why you get, people are like, oh yeah, 7 to 9 servings. I need to keep my processed grains up. I need to get, store-bought granola in the package bars.
I need to get like heart healthy.
And remember that we played this ad on our show before too, where Special K had this ad out. If you eat a bowl of cereal for 2 weeks, you'll lose weight or something.
A
Special
K diet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was
Special K diet and all that stuff.
With the pyramid. I think I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say, I've heard different people talk about these teams of researchers that apparently, according to Calley, came from the cigarette industry and they moved over. But there are teams of researchers who are genius at their job.
Yeah.
And their only job is to learn how to make foods with what they call with the highest bliss point.
Okay.
Like
mental reaction,
biggest
basically.
Dopamine hit humanly or inhumanly possible with these foods. And that's why they're addictive.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of really interesting, I've seen like different like brain scans and different papers on how if you compare the level of bliss point that you can get from these like highly processed, highly refined foods that usually have like trans fat and sugar, refined sugar and all these things in it, you get a very similar bliss point or dopamine hit compared to like cocaine.
Yeah.
Like it's high.
Right.
And that's what makes these foods so addictive.
Right.
And I think, so it's not it's not just that the poison's in the dose or in the food. It's not good food for us. Cheetos, Doritos, packaged, whatever, but it's also, they're impossible to stop eating.
Yeah.
You can't moderate them, right? You can't moderate them like you can moderate a steak and some asparagus and a potato, which are just, you get a small, natural, normal little dopamine hit, right? Or like, that was good. You get a little GLP-1 activation in your gut.
Yeah.
You eat the whole thing, you're like, I'm full. You can't binge on that food.
Yeah.
You won't binge on that food.
Right.
So part of the problem is it's not just the foods themselves, it's the fact that they are intentionally designed to not
put down,
for you to not be able to moderate them. Yeah. So it's just, it's brilliant.
So this next video on the Devil's Bargain. So
Devil's Bargain.
Calley.
Good job.
He was a lobbyist for Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So
listen to what he has to say here.
Yeah.
The criminal part, the devil's bargain, is that the healthcare system, you'd expect to be speaking out about why we're getting so sick, but they're not only silent on the reasons, they're not only trained Casey the first day of Stanford Med School, that we're basically taking it as a given that people are lazy and going to get sick. We're just going to profit from treating them. They're silent enough. They're actually complicit. Working for Coke, I helped steer money to the American
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, working for Coca-Cola, they actually pay money to the American Diabetes Association. They actually pay money to the American Academy of Pediatrics. If there's one thing the American Diabetes Association, which sets the standard of care for diabetes management, should be doing, they should be saying, we're not going to accept money from Coke, which is diabetes water. They accept money from Coke.
Yeah, that makes these sorts of relationships and deals make things make sense. Like that new food compass that came out recently that I think
that changed the paradigm, the food pyramid.
Well, I mean, it almost was worse because yeah, I mean, I think they called it the compass. I remember looking through it and just being like, is this a joke?
What does it even communicate?
Well, it ranked foods and it was saying things like, Frosted Flakes or some kind of cereal is has a better ranking health-wise than like eggs.
Yeah.
So and it continually put like obviously processed unhealthy food above things like red meat and eggs, which is just crazy. Like it's absolutely crazy. But if you're taking money, from these companies, you're going to say stuff like that. Like Coke's not that bad. Right. Diabetics, research has shown that you can drink 3 Coca-Colas a day and still manage your diabetes. Like that's how you get these crazy statements. That's how it happens. And you hear them being made. So it just makes it make sense.
Do you remember the stats that they gave on, how much money goes to the FDA and CDC from some of these companies?
I can't remember. It was a big percentage.
Yeah. All the FDA's advisory board comes from big pharma, or most of it. It's like 80% of it's from big pharma.
90% of like the advisory board on like the NIH and the FDA are like compromising. They have a conflict of interest.
Yeah, conflict of interest.
And
that's right.
And that goes all the way down to the researchers that they effectively buy off to do studies with the outcomes that they want.
Right.
And it's just like conflict of interest, which is really, really frustrating for me, you guys, because like you said at the start, we want objective stuff. Yeah. Like, do you have blood sugar regulation problems? Let's look at your glucose. Let's look at your insulin. Okay. Yeah. Symptoms are helpful too, but it's really nice to have some sort of objective standard. This is why we love God, right? He gives us that in life, and it's really important, or else it's just sort of the wild, wild west. In the field that I work in, and the paradigm that I've tried to create over time with regards to exercise and health and nutrition, I've always depended fairly heavily on randomized controlled trials and what seemed to be, or at least what I thought to be reputable journals, and I wanted to be able to point to these studies and just be like, this is evidence-based. This is an objective truth. But at this point, COVID partially pushed me over the edge with that, because I just when I did a deep dive with mask wearing alone, and I needed to, because I was having all these arguments. I was just like, okay, that does not make sense for influenza-like illness. It's a virus. I mean, it's not going to work.
It's airborne. It's aerosol.
And I deep dived, and and as you know, you find that up till COVID, like almost every single study that you can find is like cloth masks do not work to mitigate influenza-like illness in general population. It was just like study after study after study. But
and then all of a sudden, all these studies came out.
They started cranking these studies out, and I mean, coming out of like New England Journal of Medicine, like really reputable journals, and that really shook me. And there were studies that I read, because you have to just go in and read them, because you can read their conclusions and just be like, well, okay, they said masks work, we recommend them. That's like, the researchers all get together at the end, and this is their little conclusion and the recommendation. But I read studies point blank that literally found the opposite. They did the study, they found no, like that the wearing the masks with the control, whatever, it didn't work, or it even made it worse. Some of them actually said these people got sicker. And then at the end, at the conclusion, they still said, but we still recommend you wear one. Unbelievable. Like, I wish I actually had saved some of those. So talk about researchers being bought off, journals not caring about what's actually true. And now, you hear about all, like, just the lobby and the funding and all these things going towards not just these schools or big organizations, but all the way down to funding and rigging actual studies so that they can point to the studies and then, preach evangelize whatever it is they want to say. I just don't even know who to trust anymore. And that's really frustrating to me, because that used to be what I did. That used to be what I pointed to, and I could at least have that. Now I don't even feel like I'm going to have that. I know there are researchers out there who are doing good work. I know, but now it's like there's this whole other layer of confounding factors and complications, because I'm like, who paid for you? Like, randomized, controlled, peer reviewed means nothing to me.
And this ought to apply some of the same principle to the health and fitness industry, where it's full of either a lot of lies, a lot of marketing, and a lot of money influencing.
Probably same thing.
And who knows what's in that pill that they're giving you?
It's just
your creatine, pure creatine. It's
so
like
much distrust.
There's so much going on there in the health, in our side of the health and medical industries, the health and fitness side. And there's a lot of trash there, which is why we started this show, is because we thought Christians should be speaking clearer and bringing, shedding the light on the health side of and the health and fitness side of things, because we need voices you can trust on this side.
Well, and I know you're so right, and I hate to say this, because again, all the things that I just said, I've always wanted to be evidence-based. I've always wanted to lean that way, but more and more, the more I see these things, I read these things, I listen to interviews like this, I am leaning harder and harder, A, into my own common sense, B, into anecdotally, even though I know that's like a 4-letter word in the science community. It's like, well, it's just anecdotal. But anecdotally, for the 20 years that I have been in this, what I have seen work and what I have seen not work. And that does not mean just what has worked for me, because that's one of the biggest blunders that people in the fitness and health industry, that's one of the worst things they do, is that they have some sort of transformation at one point in life, and they did one intervention that happened to work great for them, and they marry it for life. And that's all they know. That's their only gospel they preach to anybody, whether it's a good fit for those other people or not. So I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I am starting to lean harder and harder into what I have witnessed to actually work for people, both in the short term and in long. And I hate to say that. I would love to be able to reference these studies. Out of JAMA, out of the New England Journal of Medicine, out of the British Medical Journal, but I don't trust these people. I really don't.
And they deserve it. They don't deserve our trust either.
I hate that I have to say that, but
I want to pause here real quick, because our next show next week, we're going to do a Q&A. What do you call those shows?
Oh yeah, AMA. Ask Me Anything.
Ask Me Anything shows.
Yes, we're doing another one of those.
And you can email us, RenchMedia@gmail.com. Don't put a W there. It's just wrench. It's just RENCH. RenchMedia@gmail.com, and you can ask us anything, and we'll be answering questions next week for our show. It's an AMA, Ask Me Anything show next week, and I'll bring that up a little more here at the end. So they get into Ozempic.
Oh yay!
This is a video you specifically wanted to bring in, and this is well, let's just play the video and we'll comment off it.
It's a hot
As
topic.
a physician, what's your view of Ozempic?
I think it's very dark. I think it's a stranglehold on the U.S. population, almost like solidifying this idea that there is a magic pill. I mean, literally, the book by Johann Ari is called Magic Pill, convincing us that, salvation from our chronic health issues is going to be found in a shot when we are living in a toxic stew that's destroying our cellular biology. It's, of course, for certain patients, taking GLP-1 agonists is going to be helpful for their conditions and might jumpstart their way to getting back to health.
Is that the name of the active drug?
GLP-1 agonists. Yeah. So GLP-1.
Sorry, not fluent in this.
No. It's that's what the medications are. And so they're basically stimulating a hormone that's made in our digestive system that cues satiety and does many other things. We are the only species in the world that has an obesity and chronic disease epidemic. The only species in the world that has a chronic disease and obesity epidemic because of ultra-processed food.
Yeah.
Didn't she go on to say
huge can of worms?
That Ozempic was made in Sweden or something? What was?
I thought, Europe. I can't remember.
Somewhere in Europe, and they don't even use it in Europe for that drug, but Americans use it.
I thought maybe they said Germany, but it's somewhere in Europe. Yeah, it's not made here, but they're just profiting off of it, which is, that's its own separate issue. But we could probably, guys, do. And
Americans want a pill for everything. They want the easy way out.
Well, and we're also just by far, in terms of developed countries, the fattest and unhealthiest.
Yeah.
So there's a way more need for a magic weight loss pill.
Right.
I'm just going to say, listen, I think we probably should do an entire show on Ozempic and GLP-1 agonists at some point.
Have you read The Magic Pill?
It is. I haven't read that book, no, but I've done quite a bit. I can still do more, and I will, of research on these peptides, basically, because they're so popular right now. And so being in the industry I'm in, I felt like, okay, I need to understand them. And
Tony said it's Sweden or Norway.
Oh, Sweden or Norway. Okay. Yeah. I know it's in Europe. It's not here. That's for sure. Thanks, Tony. Okay. I just will say this for now, but I would love to bring on an expert to talk about it, or even just have us talk about it, because it's really, really common, and doctors are starting to prescribe these GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, tirzepatide. They just go by all these different names, but they're a lot of them. Some do some things better, but they're kind of under the umbrella of GLP-1 agonists. So they're getting prescribed quickly and a lot on the the national health policy side of things. I think it's horrendous, and I think that's more where they're coming from. Is okay. They're literally it's a weekly injection. Yeah.
Ozempic is a weekly injection.
A weekly injection, okay. And on the
man, what a great payment plan for big pharma.
So, talk about perverse incentives.
Yeah,
like this. Right. You don't need to change anything. You just keep eating garbage and keep not exercising and keep your terrible lifestyle.
Don't start walking.
You don't need to. Just take this shot. It'll take your appetite away. Yeah. You'll not eat as much and you'll lose weight. Yeah. There's some serious issues with incentives. They're also pushing this on children. So I believe currently it's cleared for kids 12 and older, but they're pushing for the age of 6, which is insane.
Because when they started out the podcast with Tucker, they said 50% of children are experiencing some sort of chronic illness.
Yeah. Childhood obesity in America is going up so rapidly, and it is so high here. So it is a problem.
Yeah.
But I understand so what I just said, that's kind of where they're coming from a public policy kind of standpoint. I totally get it, where you're still in this toxic stew, as she said. It's not dealing with the root cause, which is your diet and your lifestyle, right? So it's just sort of band-aiding it by giving you a shot that, among other things, it does sensitize insulin. It does work on your brain. There's actually, it's a pretty amazing peptide. I actually think it can be used well. It's just, we're abusing it already. And if you want to really give it a fair shake, and you want to hear somebody who is well educated on the topic talk about the possible pros of these GLP-1 agonists, Dr. Tina Moore is probably the best resource that I've been able to find right now. She has her own podcast, the Dr. Tina Show, I think. Okay. Just get into podcasts and look up Dr. Tina Moore, but she's also on the circuit right now talking about actually, and her thing is, you already need to be weight training. You already need to be eating clean. And the key is, if you just feel like you need that extra edge, you're super weight loss resistant, you're already doing all these other things. Her thing is, these can be used cyclically in micro doses. And I think she makes a good point.
Oh, like Ozempic could be used like a
micro doses. Yes. And in her opinion, she's seen great results with her clients. But again, she knows what she's doing.
But those are also the more difficult people too that she's working with.
And they're already, she's not going to go there with them if they are not already. Are you strength training? Are you getting your cardio in? Are you eating clean? Are you doing all the things? And so I don't really blame, just like you can blame this drug, you can blame this gun, you can blame anything. I just think our approach to it is not good. And I think that doctors, I will say this, I know we're talking a lot about this particular topic, but I see doctors even in our own town, even locally, handing it out, prescribing it out way too soon and without asking sometimes anything about the person's like just general metabolic health or how they're eating
or nutrition
or how they're eating. I mean, like I think this should be like a last, what's the word for that? Like the absolute last resort.
Last resort.
Like a last resort. Like what you do if you were a really special case and you've tried everything else, or it's this, or get your stomach stapled. You know what I mean? Like that. And I think there can be a place for it and they can be effective. There's definitely cons to it, especially if you're dosing really high. And don't even get me started on the weight regain rate once you get off of it, which is very, very high for a lot of obvious metabolic reasons, especially if you're not, strength training and maintaining your muscle, which a lot of people aren't. So there's that issue too. But I just can't believe how quickly doctors are like, oh, your BMI is high. Here's some Ozempic. And it's like, wait, what are you eating?
Oof.
Are you moving? Like what? Like I just can't even believe it. And
we're also in a university town, so doctors can even get away with this more. Because the students, they want the pills. Like, just give me the fast fix. Give me the pill.
Does. Yeah, everybody does. And man, you can spot, ladies, I'm just going to tell you right now, we all know you're on it. Okay. Ozempic
you've called it out on a number of women.
Face is the most obvious, sad looking thing I have ever seen.
Because you look a little gaunt after taking it for a month or two.
Like literal fat and muscle even deposits when you lose weight that rapidly.
Yeah,
when you go on a really, really high dose, your appetite is zero. They literally just stop eating. It slows gastric emptying to the point that usually there's a decent amount of low grade to high grade, depending on the person and the dose, nausea all the time. So that makes you not want to eat either. And you're just not hungry. You'll literally one bite of pizza, anything. And you're just like, I'm good.
Wow.
And you do that in the short term, you will lose weight rapidly. And I'm telling you, every time I see someone who's someone gave them a script for a high dose tirzepatide or Ozempic or whatever, I'm like, either that person has cancer
or they're on Ozempic.
Or they're on a GLP-1.
Wow.
And that is a terrible,
baby.
If you are losing, no matter how you are losing it, I don't care if you're fasting, you cut carbs, you're just cleaning up your diet, you're on Ozempic, doesn't matter. If you are losing more than 1 to 2 pounds a week, that is too fast weight loss. You are going to lose muscle. Your body, the faster and more rapid you lose weight like that, on the tail end, the more aggressive all of your built-in defense mechanisms are going to fire back up. And let me tell you, you guys, all drugs stop working as well at around the 5-year mark. That has just been true throughout. I mean, that is just, it has stood the test of time. No matter the drug, it stops being as effective at about the 5-year mark. These drugs right now are incredibly expensive. And we actually don't have a ton of long-term research, like what happens if you inject this every week for 30 years.
Does it give you cancer?
I mean,
we don't know.
What effect is it going to have on all the other incretin hormones in your gut? We don't really know. I don't think it's a good idea. So even though on the box of Ozempic and all these other GLP-1 agonists, it says this is meant to be a lifetime drug. That is what it's designed to be. A lot of people are using it, getting the weight off and then coming off, and they are an absolute train wreck. Tanked metabolism, lower muscle mass, hunger comes back. What do you think happens? Okay, so you do need to think long-term and you do need to know what you're doing. But all that said, I don't think it's the devil. I think there's a place for it. Go hunt down Dr. Tina Moore. Any interview that she does on it, she's really, really good.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And so here's what was kind of the most incredible aspect about this interview. Of course, we've been practicing this and we've been, we're Christians, and I think Casey, does it seems like her parents kind of grew her up in some sort of salad bowl of religion in her family,
a stable, somewhat spiritual,
but she also basically admittedly said, I basically kind of had becoming a feminist, I didn't want to have kids and all that stuff, but
she drank the Kool-Aid.
So she drank the Kool-Aid. So here's just there's 2 videos I want to play with her. Neil, go ahead and play the first one.
What about you allowed you to connect these pretty obvious dots?
Parenting.
How? What did your parents do?
My parents. Our parents focused on incentives. Incentives are everything. Incentives are why Americans are sick right now. If we change the incentives, we'd get healthy in 2 years. Our country would be the most competitive country in the world. my parents' incentive in our family was to ask questions, not to have any stars or marks or anything, So what was celebrated in our family was sitting down at the dinner table in DC and asking questions and poking at ideas. We were celebrated for thinking about things in a bigger picture. That is not, you talked about this with Tim Dillon on your recent podcast, the boomers, they just want the stars for their kids, to get all these little badges. But that was not what was celebrated. My parents didn't
We
care.
developed our own compulsion to climb up the ladder, but it was always instilled ask
add
questions,
value,
and
questions,
we never
think
felt
for yourself.
Actually like our parents were that happy with rising up. And it was like, are we being good people? Ask. And that was really instilled in us.
I think to kind of put the Christian take on that, the explicitly Christian take on that.
Yeah.
She says her parents enabled her to think clearly, to be able to ask questions. That was her first comment was my parents. Tucker was like, why are you able to kind of get out of this?
And she immediately, she's like, my parents.
It was really good. And
that's
then
really moving.
Very moving. And then the other thing was, she said incentives, but she's talking about, and of course we believe in incentives as Christians. We discipline with spankings an incentive, and rewarding's an incentive.
It's just a different word to use, but I think I get her point.
But what I want to hammer here is teaching your kids to ask questions. That's what the classical Christian education is so good at, question asking. But create a culture in your family where you're sitting around the dinner table and where you ask your kids questions. You drive conversation, you get your kids to tell stories, and then you get your kids to ask questions back in return. Have that kind of culture at your dinner table where your kids are, it's just part of the indoctrination that you're giving your kids is ask questions, think clearly, and of course for us, think biblically about what you're doing.
I think that's so good. And, I want to think that we, obviously we're sitting here and you and I talk about be a skeptic, ask the questions, blah, blah. We talk about it all the time, but if you think about it, in your own family's culture, in dinner table, I think that's a lot of times where this is why you're so obsessed with dinner. We cannot
having it as a family. I want to have it as a family,
and some days I'm like, I might just need to eat at the bar. He's like, no, we're sitting down at dinner. And in the moment I'm like, you're the worst, but he's right. And it's really great. I'm really glad that you push for that, because that's where a lot of these important conversations happen
with the kids,
among other things, especially when you're busy, man. Our kids are in school, they're in sports. We don't see them much of that. The dinner is so important. So I just want to say that. Right. But also I think we could do better just asking questions or having them ask us questions, because that's how you learn. Hey, why do you think you were baptized as a baby?
Yeah.
Hey, why do you believe in heaven? Hey, why do you think we try so hard to not eat a lot of processed food? Honestly, what's your answer?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes when we do that, I'm amazed at the intelligence and thoughtfulness of their answer, which reminds you, they're always listening and
they're
watching.
Always paying attention to mom and dad.
They're not missing anything.
Yeah.
And then B, sometimes they're like, I don't actually know. And it's like, well, geez, that's my bad. Let's talk about it. Let's give you reasons why. That's just a really good reminder. I think we do it some, but I think we could be better. Yeah. And if you're also struggling to build a dinner time culture, or maybe you just have kind of not done that, or maybe your kids are just now getting old enough where you can. Yeah. Because when you have babies, it's just
you and your wife.
And you're just fighting to get them to eat 2 bites of whatever. It's just, not great conversation. But maybe you're just getting to the point where you're like, oh, we could actually start doing this. Yeah. And you don't know where to start. You don't know what to talk about. Just do questions.
Yeah.
Have them ask you questions. You ask them questions. It's an easy, natural way to just start good, helpful conversation. And just nothing should be assumed.
Yeah.
Why do we send you to a Christian school? Why don't we send you to a public school? Why? I think it's really good.
Right. Yeah, it's good, baby. All right. And then she follows up with this.
I cannot wait to have children. There is no greater role. There is no greater role in this world. And, I was sold such a bill of lies, climb the corporate, climb the medical ladder, become the chair of an institution. I can think of no greater thing that we can do than have children and keep them healthy.
Yes.
Right. And I just, up until a couple of years ago, I didn't even want to have children because I thought it was a liability to this value system of just rise the ranks, make money. But I don't think there's anything more important we could be doing than creating healthy children who are thinking for themselves, who are eating healthy food. And I cannot wait for that role. And I think it's a spiritual corruption of our society right now that we have forgotten that this is the most important thing that we can do. It's unbelievable how far off we are. And I think it is deeply a spiritual crisis because we have lost sight of what really matters.
It's amazing to me how both men and women have bought into the lie of having either no kids or as little kids as possible to optimize their experience and opportunity in the world. And this especially with women who've bought into kind of the feminism, bought into this deception that you're more valuable reporting to 10 men at a corporation than having, children, that you're more valuable out there working at a bar or a waitress or whatever.
Or what she did.
And what she did, she was 9-year doctor at Stanford, that you're more valuable out there.
Or that it's just more impactful and a higher achievement to do all these other things. It's really cool to hear her. She has clearly been red-pilled herself.
I know, yeah.
And she refers to that. Like she calls it her awakening. And I love to hear women speak, like on Tucker Carlson, where a lot of people are going to hear them.
Yeah.
I wish more women would talk this way because it is not only absolutely true and important for women to hear, but I also think that a lot of the problems in America with regards to our health do stem back to the feminist movement when the women all decided to leave the house and go to work. And again, you guys, I say this every time. I myself do work outside of the house. I am not just,
Proverbs 31 woman. We don't have to. Yeah, it's silly that we have to bring up this caveat every time we have this conversation. I just always
feel like I should, because I don't want any girl to be like, I'm a bad mom. But because before that time, there was not this need for all this super hyper palatable, cheap processed food. Or fast food.
That's exactly
because
right.
Mom prioritized. It was her full-time job to be at home and make food at home. And that sounds like, okay, home cooked meals. That sounds like not that big of a deal. I think it's a huge deal. Yeah. And one of the biggest struggles that I have had working with clients, most of which are women, many of which are moms, in trying to help them get their own health and by extension, their family's health turned around is I cannot get them to cook at home.
Yeah.
They don't know how. And they're too busy because they work.
Yeah.
And not knowing how is a problem. So women, moms, teach your children how to cook food.
That's right.
That is really important. And I need to remember that because it is I'm really good at doing it myself. Like, look how healthy this is. Look at this meat I made. Does my daughter know how to do that? Does she understand? You cut up the broccoli, you do the olive oil, you salt it later after it's done so it doesn't get as soggy. Have I actually taken the time to teach her that?
Yeah.
And you can easily have this dialed in yourself and not teach it to the next generation and just really mess things up. And then, there's also the very common issue of women are just like, I don't have time. I'm too tired.
Yeah.
It's just chicken nuggets or, McDonald's or whatever several times a week.
Yeah.
What does that do to your family's health?
Over 18 years.
Over year after year after year after year. Okay. One time, not a big deal. Another time, not a big deal. Steady stream, chronically over time, absolute health wrecker. So I'm not blaming women and the feminist movement for all of our health issues. We have a lot. We've talked about them. There's corruption, there's money, there's all these things, conflict of interest, all of that. But you don't have to buy into that system if you don't want to.
Yeah.
You can, and we talked about this, I think, in a couple podcasts ago, where we were like, okay, our health, what do you do if your family's super unhealthy and you don't know where to start and you don't have time? Like, what do you do? I mean, this is not all on the women. Like men, you should be, if your wife is too busy to be able to take care of the nutritional health of herself and you and your family, then you are responsible for that. And you need to be encouraging her very, very strongly and kindly and taking the pressure off of her so that she can say no to or quit or change whatever she needs to change.
Yeah, that's right,
whether it's volunteer work, it's a job, whatever. If there's financial pressure on her, and she's feeling like she has to pay the bills, and that's actually killing her ability to, for the most part, make home-cooked meals. It doesn't mean it has to be really fancy. It doesn't mean you have to be rich and have filet mignon every night, just basic home-cooked meals. Yeah. If she doesn't have the ability or the energy or the time to do that, that's on you, and you need to help her get in a position where she can do that. Maybe that means you need to get a second job. Maybe that means you need to sell that big house you live in and buy a smaller one so that you guys can pay the mortgage without your wife having to basically do your job or some other dude's job. And she can come home and do the job that she's supposed to do, which is not just what she's supposed to do, but as Casey just said, it is the most important job. It is very, very important. So I think even though we talked about a lot of very overwhelming and frustrating and almost kind of discouraging things today, we all have an immense amount of agency to buy out of this whole thing.
That's right.
You do not need to take the drugs. You do not need to buy a bunch of processed food. You can change these things very, very easily. And honestly, this is what I talk to people about doing every single day. This is why most of my time goes into health and lifestyle consulting, because these are the kinds of changes that we need to make and we can make, but you have to be willing. If you're in a deep, dark hole and your habits are bad, you got to be willing to make really big changes.
That's really good, baby.
Really big changes.
And here's the deal, husbands, you don't want your wife picking up your slack for your responsibilities, because God made the world in a certain way. Like there's a way he made it. Like grain runs a certain direction. Water runs downhill. God created the world to run in a certain way, and we need to like redouble down on cutting with the grain that God has designed us to. God made men to provide for the family, to defend the family, to destroy where needed to defend, to go to war. God did not make women to provide for the family. Now, sometimes in situations that ends up happening,
of course, there's exceptions.
But God did not
make
women to provide for the family. God did not make women to go to war. God did not make women to take life. And again, there's examples in Scripture where women did take life. But God made women to give life. God made women to raise the family. God made women to build the house. God made women to be builders and not destroyers like men. Yeah. And so when we cut in with the grain and the way that God's designed us, that's how the world functions. That you're cutting with God's design. It's going to work.
It's going to work better. And I just want to your point, and I just want to reemphasize the fact that women, a huge part of you running your household and taking care of your family is managing their nutrition.
Yeah.
Food preparation is a huge deal.
Yep.
It is a huge deal, not just in terms of family culture and just taking care of basic needs, but in terms of setting yourself and your spouse and your kids up for long-term great health, because food is the most impactful input that you can put into your body to affect your health in the short term and the long. And you're developing habits that your children and skills and knowledge that your kids are going to take with them and then pass on to their own children. So please do not underestimate how important nutrition and food is, and just how impactful and
you are in their kid's life. Job. I mean, think of it this
such an important job.
Think of it this way. I mean, God made women have powerful bodies. They can create children. Men can't do that. They can help in the process, but women have powerful bodies where they can create children. And what you're doing there is actually creating wealth. If you think of, in terms of the economics of it, let's say you had, 4 boys. We'll just work with boys. Let's say you have 4 boys. We're almost done. We have
school's back in.
We got to go pick up the kids.
We got to end on time now. Speaking of children,
let's say you have, a mom has 4 boys, and she thinks that, I need to go to work and make $60,000 a year over here and put my kids in school, whatever, or daycare, whatever it is.
School, all of it.
But if you instill your life into the 4 boys, each one of those boys has the potential to make, let's say, $100,000 a year, or let's say $60,000 a year. And now you raised 4 boys to go out there and make $60,000 a year each. And the economic power that a woman has on her family and how that exponentially impacts the family is way more than what she thinks she can do if she goes out in the world over here.
Yeah, just thinking long term. Yeah.
Thank you, baby. So if you guys want to be in a conversation with us, email us. Next week's show is AMA. Ask Me Anything show.
Bring on the questions. I love those shows.
RenchMedia@gmail.com. That's RENCH. Wrench without a W. RENCH. RenchMedia@gmail.com. Please send us some questions, and we're excited to do the AMA Ask Me Anything next week.
Yeah, and you guys can also find me at my website and reach out to me there. Just AnnieWrench.com.
AnnieWrench.com.
Yep.
Again, no W before the R. AnnieWrench.com.
No W.
And we hope to see a lot of you at ProdigalAmerica.com in October. Go to ProdigalAmerica.com to sign up.
We're excited.
Thank you for all those tuning live. We got K Glad, M Square.
There's a growing movement in the American workplace, one that's not dominated by a political party or ideology, but by real Americans who oppose the divisive rules and cancel culture mandates that have invaded many of the nation's largest companies. This is a movement of hometown America, people who want to build their careers, raise their families, and live their faith in the spirit and legacy of the American dream. At Red Balloon, we're connecting no-nonsense employers with hardworking employees, people who are passionate about bringing accomplishment and success to their workplace. If you're an employer looking for serious talent, you need to post your job on Red Balloon. And if you're an employee who's tired of a cancel culture workplace, then come to Red Balloon and find your future. Because you should be free to grow your career, and you shouldn't have to choose between your job and your values.